Hello, once again in this video we are back on the Reforged test server. Now in one of the previous videos about the new tanks, some of you guys were very observant and pointed out, oh look, the Leo is now on its own in the tech tree. So yeah, let's talk about that. Adding the new tank, this Stridsvagn Emil hybrid vehicle for the Kranvagn tech tree did of course mean that there are now two tier 7 Swedish tanks, and Wargaming hasn't even tried to hide it. There is a line leading on from the Leo going to nothing, with a perfect 3 slots for a tier 8, a tier 9 and a tier 10. Now, those of you who already play World of Tanks PC or know about the tanks on there will already know what those 3 tanks are. But it is also worth noting, ASUN has already leaked that the UDES 1516 might be coming to the game, and ASUN, while he is not an official source, he is quite reliable with his leaks. Generally, they do turn out to be completely correct, so I think we can kind of expect what might be coming for the game. I mean, this line leading from behind the Leo right here, that makes it pretty obvious, because if there was not going to be any tanks after it, they would probably remove that little line that leads on from behind the Leo. Anyway, let's just talk about those 3 tanks quickly, a potential new tech tree for the game. So, starting from the tier 8, this will be probably the tank that leads on from the Leo. Once again, this is just speculation. Wargaming hasn't officially confirmed the UDES tech tree, however, again, evidence does seem to point in that direction. But let's talk about the tier 8 that would lead on from after the Leo. This thing, I would expect it to be pretty similar to like the Lansen C or the CS53, as they are kind of fairly close in the traits they have. A pretty mobile medium tank with good power to weight ratio and top speed, a high alpha gun, it says 360 here, but for Blitz you can probably expect like 310 or 320, and with a kind of similar reload to like the Lansen or the CS53 for example. Now, it is worth noting, the UDES tech tree on World of Tanks PC does have siege mode, which means that if you are moving at a certain speed, you do gain extra gun depression. I mean, as you can see here, this tank only has 6 degrees base gun depression, but then in siege mode at low speed, the hull actually angles down to give you in total 12 degrees. Of course, with Blitz, it's not 100% certain if that mechanic is going to come. I don't know if they would actually implement that, but whether they do or don't, it would kind of affect this tank's gun depression. I think if they don't implement it, then it'll have like maybe 8 or 10 gun depression, but if they do, then hey, maybe it will have the full 12, because that would be like the whole point of such a mechanic. You can also see the armor isn't great for the tier 8 at least, which will be, well, like I said, it will probably play kind of like the Lansen C or the CS53. Next, the tank after it would be the UDES 16. There's not really much reason for Wargaming to change which tanks are in this tree, and this one is pretty different to the previous one, mainly in the armor profile. And you can see that it's all an auto ricochet kind of angle across the whole tank. Of course, that does mean that, well, heat rounds, for example, may be able to penetrate through if I can find a tank which has heat as premium ammo. But yeah, since it is relying on such an auto ricochet angle, it does mean that heat ammo is going to be able to actually go through your armor, unless you are using gun depression, in which case it is still a very strong vehicle in such a regard. But yeah, the UDES 16, it's kind of similar to the previous tank in its gun, but it's just mainly differing in that armor profile, because it does have a lot more armor than the UDES 14.5. But it's all based on auto ricochet, so you do kind of have to watch out for that. It'll work really well against AP and APCR shells, but if you have heat, it's not going to be so great. But you can see kind of what this tank offers. 390 alpha in PC, translated to Blitz, that's kind of like 350, maybe 360 at most. And it has alright DPM. It's not the best, but it's also not terrible. You can see again with these on-move dispersion, that is due to these tanks kind of having a siege mode. hence why they're kind of funny. Again, we don't know if the siege mode would actually come to Blitz or not, so it kind of affects how this tank would play. But you can see here, this one is a 5+7 gun depression, so again, you can kind of expect maybe 8 or 9 degrees of gun depression if it doesn't have the siege mode, and well, up to 12 if they do give it to the tank. Top speed is a bit lower, but that is of course going to be because this tank does have more armor than the UDES 14.5. Now, the top of the tree, the UDES 1516. This is going to be the tier 10. Again, very likely. It's not so much of a chance that they actually change the tanks that are going to be in the tree. For Blitz, it will probably be kind of like the 121 in terms of its alpha damage. This one shows 440. Who knows if Wargaming will give it 440? Maybe it will have like 410, 400. Who knows? But usually Wargaming does tone down the alpha damage when tanks go from PC to Blitz. Once again, this tank does have more armor than the UDES 14.5, and well, its upper plate is of course much smaller than narrower than the previous tank, the UDES 16, because it is basically just almost completely flat. This thing also does have 12 degrees, actually 13 degrees of gun depression, which makes it great on a ridgeline, but that once again depends whether Wargaming is actually going to give us the siege mode mechanic. If they don't, it's going to be kind of hard to know what kind of gun depression these tanks will have, but again, I would expect between 8 and 10 degrees. You can see against heat, its turret does become weaker, but that is just because it is based on auto ricochet angles. AP, APCR, it's all going to bounce every single time. But yeah, I think this one's pretty interesting. Its mobility isn't the best, it's nothing impressive. In fact, the tanks get slower as you go up the tiers. You can see with the UDES 14.5, it's 25 horsepower per ton. The UDES 16 is 21 horsepower per ton. And then the UDES 1516 is 19 horsepower per ton. So they get slower as you go up the tiers, but they also get more armored. And the UDES 1516 is an alpha damage beast, right? It's got quite high alpha damage, and in Blitz, the only tank which would have the same or higher alpha damage than this would be the WZ121 at tier 10. So it does kind of add a new 120mm medium at tier 10, which I think right now the 121 is the only one other than the Caro, but again, Caro's kind of got its alpha damage nerfed, so that one doesn't really count that much. But yeah, a pretty interesting tank and tech tree overall, I think, especially if they do implement that mechanic with the siege mode, but who knows if that is actually going to happen. If not, it may just be a high alpha kind of armored medium tank line, which will be still quite different to the mediums we have in Blitz at the moment. Anyway, still, I think it's interesting whether it has the mechanic or not, that we'll get a new tech tree of Swedish tanks. It has been a while, and for the longest time, Sweden has been the only nation in the European tree with only a single line. So it is nice to actually finally get some Swedish mediums. Again, all speculative, who knows if they're actually going to come. Wargaming hasn't actually said anything to CCs about the Swedish mediums, so yeah, who knows if they're actually going to come. But if they did, I would expect, firstly we'll get the Type 5 heavy line, and then maybe 5-6 months after that we might get a new tech tree. Who knows if that's going to be the Tessak or if it will be the Swedish medium tanks, because we have also known that the Tessak has been in test for quite a while, but nothing has yet been teased about it. But yeah, kind of interesting. Thank you all for pointing it out. I did notice, but it clearly shows you guys are interested, so I thought I might make a video on it anyway, just to, talk about it and kind of affirm your suspicions, I guess. But just keep watching the news and we'll actually see if this does come true or not. But yeah, that's it. Thanks all for watching. See you in the next one.